and put the full weight of the presidency behind RyanCare. President Trump also paying homage to Andrew Jackson, who was born 250 years ago today. We'll have special coverage of tonight's rally, and among our guests, Congressman Dave Bratt, who opposes RyanCare, and Congressman Michael Burgess, who supports it. Also tonight, Trump's Justice Department taking action against Russian spies. The DOJ announced the indictment of 4 defendants, including 2 Russian intelligence officials, for stealing data from at least 500 million Yahoo accounts. We'll have the full report for you. And President Trump teasing everyone, his supporters and detractors alike, with a bombshell announcement regarding his accusation that President Obama wiretapped him during the election.
Wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
So what could it be? We take it all up with leading conservative, former senator and president of the Heritage Foundation, Jim DeMint, the dean of Republican strategist, Ed Rollins, Matt Slapp, and Charlie Hurt. They're here tonight. Good evening, everybody. The embattled RyanCare legislation faces its biggest test tomorrow as the House Budget Committee votes on whether to approve it. 3 members of the powerful Freedom Caucus serve on the Budget Committee, and if only 4 Republicans were to join Democrats in voting against the bill, it would fail. All of this comes as President Trump prepares to hold a rally this hour in Nashville. He's there to promote the Ryan plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. And breaking news tonight, a federal judge in Hawaii has just put President Trump's revised extreme vetting on hold. U.S. District Court Judge Derek Watson, an Obama appointee, issued his ruling just moments ago after hearing arguments on Hawaii's request for a temporary restraining order against the president's executive order. His ruling prevents that executive order from going into effect tomorrow. More than half a dozen states are now trying to stop the order. Federal courts in Maryland, Washington State, and Hawaii hearing arguments today about whether it should be allowed to go into practice. Hawaii arguing that the ban discriminates on the basis of nationality and would prevent Hawaii residents from receiving visits from relatives in the 6 predominantly Muslim nations covered under the executive order ban. Again, a federal court judge blocking President Trump's extreme vetting order. The first order was put on hold back on February 3rd. Our first guest tonight says the AHCA bill, or RyanCare as it's often called, fails to halt the parts of Obamacare that have been driving the cost of insurance higher for Americans. Joining us tonight to discuss how conservatives can derail the legislation, leading conservative president of the Heritage Foundation, former U.S. Senator Jim DeMint. Jim, great to have you on the show. This has been a remarkable period since RyanCare was revealed. Is it your judgment that, as Speaker Ryan himself says, that he has the votes in the House and likely the Senate?
I don't think so, Lou, and I know the White House is working feverishly to listen to ideas that could improve the bill. And so my hope is, obviously, that this bill will at least take a pause, accept some amendments, because, as you mentioned, this bill does not do the things we need to do to push down the cost of health insurance and health care or create more choices for the people of this country. And it keeps one of the big problems of Obamacare, which is the Medicaid expansion, which means it has large incentives in here to expand Medicaid to able-bodied Americans. And that's at the expense of older, disabled, sicker people right now. So a lot of this doesn't make sense. I'm still optimistic the White House is listening to some of our ideas that would create the competition and lower the prices over the next couple of years.
Which is what the president himself has said he wants to be the outcome in any revision, repeal, and replacement of Obamacare. Let me ask you this, though. This bill, as it is revealed to the public, to the Senate, to the White House. Speaker Ryan himself has basically said no amendments, take it or leave it. The two committees that heard the legislation, that is Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means, no amendments in either committee, and apparently no time or inclination to accept amendments. Yeah. Can this proceed in that fashion?
Well, that's not the way it will proceed. What they're doing is going through kind of a perfunctory committee vote and markup, as they call it. But then at the end, they'll have what's called a manager's amendment. The Republican member who's managing the bill on the floor will offer an amendment that they believe will have the votes to pass. Our hope at that point is they've included some of the amendments that the conservatives have been talking about, that the White House has been listening to. Our hope is that that final manager's bill will actually be a big improvement and pass. So we just want to be able to say it's a move in the right direction. We don't expect this first phase to be perfect, Lou, but a lot of the things that have been promised, like interstate competition, association health plans, those don't happen into what they call phase 3. And I know from being in Washington almost 20 years now that if you bet on the come, you usually lose that bet.
Yeah, and as this legislation goes ahead, it is important that there be some construction, some sort of design here that the president can sign. The president has made it very clear, at least it seems to me, very clear, he's not going to sign a bill that doesn't do what he has promised to the American people, namely reduce premiums, extend health care coverage itself. These are tough standards. Your reaction?
I think he wants to keep his promises, and I believe that, again, as I mentioned, Lou, that the bill that has been presented cannot pass the House, and if it did, it would not pass the Senate. I believe all the Republican leaders know that at this point. So I think they're going to ultimately be anxious to find those ideas that will improve the bill and help it to pass. That's what we're hoping for, obviously, here, as we have presented a number of ideas at the Heritage Foundation, which we think can push down costs and give consumers a lot more choices.
And tomorrow, a test, the budget. That vote begins tomorrow, will be taken tomorrow. Your sense about its prospects?
Well, I think the conservatives will stick together. Whether or not they can get the 4 votes that are needed, I'm not sure. I haven't done that vote counting. But as we know, and I know from serving in the House, if they don't need your vote, they don't want your opinion. And unless the conservatives hold together, their opinion isn't going to count. So if they can pass this bill without conservative votes, they will. My hope is that they won't be able to pass it. They'll listen to our ideas, and we can help make the bill better.
Very quickly, at 7:30, we understand the Freedom Caucus is meeting. We are expecting to hear from both Senator Rand Paul and Congressman Mark Meadows, perhaps Congressman Jim Jordan. Your thoughts about what is at play here on the part of those conservatives?
Well, if you want to know who the patriots are in Congress, it's the House Freedom Caucus and Mike Lee's little group over in the Senate that includes Rand Paul. But these folks are smart, they're tough. They want to get to yes, too, Lou. They want the president to succeed. They want the Republicans to succeed. But they don't want to betray the promises we've been making America for over 6 years. And if this bill goes through and we cannot say that it's an honest-to-goodness repeal, then I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed.
All right. Jim DeMint, always great to talk with you. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Lou.
President Trump set to release his first budget tomorrow, one that boosts military spending by $54 billion, cuts non-defense programs by the same amount. So let's take a look at some of those cuts, the reported cuts. As you see here, 31% cut into the EPA, 28% cut out of the State Department budget, 18% cut out of Commerce, 14% reduction in the budget of Housing and Urban Development. And my next guest serves on the House Budget Committee, has said he intends to vote against the GOP leadership-backed plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. Joining me now, Congressman Dave Brat, also a member of the Freedom Caucus. And Congressman, great to have you with us. Before we turn to the budget and some of these issues of the day, let me ask you, can you give us a sense of what's coming from the leaders of the Freedom Caucus, Senator Rand Paul at the bottom of the hour?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just keeping our word. The person back home says when you repeal Obamacare, that's what they expect to see. And so the major problem is we don't want a federally run health care system. That's the problem, right? Everything the feds touch is insolvent right now. Medicare is insolvent. Social Security is insolvent. I taught economics to kids for 20 years, and I promised them I'd go to D.C. and do the best I can. And so we can get to yes. There is a yes vote. If we can get the insurance regs, that's the only piece that'll bring the cost curve truly down. You can get to yes, but that's a Herculean lift. And Ted Cruz has shown us the way. If Vice President Pence goes in the chair, we can get reconciliation with regs, bucket 2 it's called, into law, right? We don't want this 4-year shifts of dueling executive agencies going back and forth. We want to put this in law so that we bend the cost curve down. And the health insurance regs, no young person can go out right now and shop across state lines and get a low-cost health insurance policy.
Well, the president has made it very clear he wants to see that. Yep. Speaker Ryan has said in due time. And you and the Freedom Caucus say what?
Yeah, well, we say the crucial error with Obamacare 8 years ago was the health insurance guys went to the White House looking at their shoes, and they only paid attention to coverage. And they didn't pay attention to price and bending the cost curve down. And so now we have a disaster, right? You got a death spiral, and costs are going up at 25%. The CBO score just came out, said we're going to reduce costs 10%, but that's after costs go up 25%. So if you can do math, 10% from 25%, costs are still going up 15%, and that's after 3 years. So it's not good enough.
Most of us can do math, but most of us also can't do what you call math in Washington, D.C., because it doesn't envision what is effectively 2 years of rising premiums, at least according to the scoring of the CBO. And then a decline in premiums. For what reason? It's a matter of conjecture. Where are we in terms of the vote tomorrow in the Budget Committee?
The Budget Committee will be tight. There's about 6 folks in play, so we'll see how that goes. But you had it right. The healthcare system and free markets, right? I got on my Adam Smith tie for symbolic purposes.
And good for you. I wish I had one to be in solidarity with you on that.
So we need to start off with a free market emphasis, right, that gets 300 million people straight with free markets where you can go out and buy across state lines and compete. And Trump has a big heart. We want to see him succeed. But to do that, there's 5% of the folks with pre-existing conditions that are over 50% of costs. So they're uninsurable. So let's take care of them with a big heart. But then let's not mess up the design of the system.
You said that very quickly, and it bears repeating slowly, if I may.
Yeah, no, we have
5%.
Yes, right.
Of those with the most severe illnesses.
Right.
Half of the cost of all health care goes to them.
And they're uninsurable, right? So the insurance markets don't cover them. We have a big heart.
But this isn't new. This isn't new. Where in the world has the Republican conference been throughout? That has been one of the many regrets, complaints against Obamacare, and yet the Republicans do not have a ready solution at hand so that the president's agenda can move forward.
Yeah, well, there's too much political pressure going up here in the bill and not enough Milton Friedman and Hayek. Paul Ryan studied Hayek. He's a free market guy. And the title, the most famous book is...
You're not going to... Are you really going to educate us on Hayek and Friedman?
The fatal conceit is all you need to know, right? Thinking that our finite human minds can capture what 300 million people need in California and Texas, across states. We can't do that math. So we need to let the free market system work for 300 million people. And let's take care of those with real needs, and we will do that.
Congressman, you and the Freedom Caucus, all I will say is Godspeed and hope that, you prevail and can prevail in that environment. Let's turn to a couple of things that have just happened. And one of them is a judge has just issued a stay against the president's executive order, his revised executive order on extreme vetting. And now that was to take effect tomorrow. Now it will not. Your reaction?
Well, that's what we have going. That's why it's important to put this stuff in law. They'll lose that one. The extreme vetting thing came up with Congress passed it. Obama chose the 7 countries, and they're all countries that are either failed states or are a threat to the United States of America. So it's a no-brainer. And unfortunately, we're playing politics. We finally got a cabinet only a week ago, right? So the evidence is overwhelming. The left is playing hardball. Trump is doing everything he can to make this country safe, and we're all with him on that.
All right. And with that, Congressman Dave Bratt, thanks for being with us. And
thank you,
we
Lou.
Appreciate it. Congressman
You bet.
Dave Bratt. Well, a reminder to follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs, like me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs. Tonight, the Justice Department announcing charges in connection with the 2014 cyber attack against 500 million Yahoo accounts. The Justice Department finding 2 criminal hackers and 2 Russian spies involved. All 4 were indicted today. The first ever criminal cyber charges against Russian government officials, members of their intelligence service, at least 2 of them. And on Wall Street today, stocks closing higher on the Fed decision to hike rates. The Dow up 113 points, most of that gain in exhilaration after raising rates. Counterintuitive, I know, but there it is. And the S&P up 20 points, the Nasdaq up 43, volume on the big board picking up to 3.8 billion shares. And I want to add that what I'm hearing from Washington, D.C. right now is that the Trump administration is considering a tax on certain products imported into the United States, but it is a targeted tax on imports and includes, amongst those products, automobiles, according to what I'm hearing from Washington. Well, crude oil snapped a 7-day losing streak, closing near $49 a barrel. The Federal Reserve today voting to raise interest rates by 0.25%. Officials still projecting 2 more interest rate hikes this year. A reminder, listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. President Trump slamming NBC for releasing his 2005 taxes, his income taxes, showing that he paid a higher rate than either President Obama or Senator Bernie Sanders. So take that.
I have no idea where they got it, but it's illegal, and you're not supposed to have it, and it's not supposed to be leaked. And it's certainly not an embarrassing tax return at all, but it's an illegal thing. They've been doing it. They've done it before, and I think it's a disgrace.
And President Trump will be with Tucker Carlson at 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight. I believe that's correct, unless the rally goes beyond that. We'll see how that plays. The president's set to hold that rally, by the way, momentarily in Nashville to promote the health care legislation, the ACHA bill, or Ryan Care, as it's been called by so many. Joining me now to discuss the prospects of Ryan Care is Congressman Michael Burgess. He's the chairman of the Subcommittee on Health and helped craft the bill in its current form. And he is the longest serving doctor in Congress, so he knows everything about ACHA, the Obamacare, and health care, most importantly of all. Doctor, great to have you with us, and it's
Thank
good
you,
to
Lou.
see you.
You're very kind. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, well, that may expire here any second when we talk about Obamacare and Ryan Care, but I know that you feel strongly about the Ryan Care legislation. As you know, the conservatives in your caucus are deeply disappointed in what has been produced.
Wait just a minute, because this is only one step of a multi-step process, and as I look back at the landscape, we are right on the cusp of the 7-year anniversary of the passage of the Affordable Care Act, and I have waited for this day for 7 long years. Sure, I want to get rid of the individual mandate. I want to get rid of the employer mandate, and we're on the verge of doing that. Is the bill, as it was reported out of my committee last week, is it perfect? No. in many ways it's not, but it is a positive first step. And credit to all the people that have worked so hard on this and put so much heart and soul into trying to get to this day. Yeah. The Vice President has been with 3 groups that I've monitored today, and with every group, whether it be moderates or conservatives or just the conference in general, he's thanked us for having the steadfast courage to be against this thing right from the get-go.
He is without question gracious, and he is also a man of immense patience, I think, and is also trying to put together a deal. To his credit, he's trying to put together a deal which, frankly, your leadership has made it more difficult than it need have been. 7 long years, as you put it. We know some of the issues. We know about chronic care and the immense burden that places on all health care dollars in this society. That bill does not address it.
Wait, I actually disagree.
Let me finish, if I may, Doctor. We know also that premiums should go down because the President of the United States said that in his campaign for the office.
Correct.
And the premiums go higher, according to the Congressional Budget Office, in the first 2 years before going into decline, not necessarily at either the rate or the depth that we would like them to. And it does not expand health care itself. Indeed, whether you look at the Medicaid expansion, or whether you look at the actual coverage and the choices made, not on the part of younger people primarily, to take the coverage, we're talking about somewhere between 7, 14, and 24 million people who will be without coverage. Is that a fair statement?
Well, you're, of course, quoting
I don't know whether you like it,
extensively from the Congressional Budget Office report.
Silly me. You're the guys who are the ones, who sent the legislation over there.
I will say this about the Congressional Budget Office. I am less impressed about their ability to predict human behavior. You know, they were wrong on the number of sign-ups for the Affordable Care Act. They were wrong about Part D on Medicare. I'm not sure if they are wrong on this projection or not. I guess we will find out. As far as the delay in the reduction of the premiums, I mean, it does take time because of the way the actuarial content of insurance policies is put together. Impossible to affect anything right now for this year because the contracts are already out. It's very difficult to affect anything for next year because that data has in fact already been collected.
I commiserate, Doctor, I really do. Except for the fact that in that 7 long years, we have had sufficient advance notice of what we would have to contend with and to come up with, to conjure plausible, effective, and pragmatic solutions to each one of those elements that are disappointing and frustrating to us all. What now is the matter with the process is the refusal to accept amendments within the House. Both your committee, Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, both did not accept amendments. Now the legislation, we have to take it on faith that it would be moved to the Senate for a vote there, where what happens? We don't know, because there's no public hearing and there's no public discussion. And this is and we have a speaker, your speaker, telling us it's a binary choice, like we are third-rate, tag-alongs on citizenship in this country.
We had a 27-hour markup in our humble little committee last week.
Yeah, I understand. And it was a record. But you know what? You didn't amend a doggone thing.
Well, the amendments that were offered were principally offered by the Democrats, and they were amendments that would have violated the rules of the Senate and ended the privilege to have this heard with a 51-vote majority over in the Senate. So they were, in effect, poison pill amendments. And yes, we did defeat all of the Democratic amendments. And I was actually proud of the men and women on the Energy and Commerce Committee for standing strong in that. Look, the President and the Vice President have both said, if you've got ideas, we want to hear them. I think they have been open in that process, and we'll see what develops over the next week's time. Lucky me, I get to do it all again in the Rules Committee next week.
Congressman, we got to jump. Congressman Burgess, thanks.
Thank you.
And the President, you can be assured, will not sign anything that doesn't deliver. Dan Coates today confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. The Senate voting for one of their own, Dan Coates, a former senator, confirming him 85-12. President Trump earlier this week slammed the Senate Democrats, led, of course, by the head clown, as he calls Senator Chuck Schumer, for slow-walking the remaining 3 cabinet nominees, Secretaries of Agriculture, Labor, and the U.S. Trade Representative. Joining me now to discuss the ruling on the president's extreme vetting order, President Trump's rally tonight in Nashville, and selling Ryan Care, chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Slapp, and veteran of 10 presidential campaigns, leading Republican strategist, Ed Rollins. Great to have you.
Nice to be with you.
To have you both with us. Let me start with, I want to put this up. This just happening in Hawaii, as we said at the outset of the show. A federal judge in Hawaii has just stayed the president's travel ban or extreme vetting order, and this is what he said in part. This from the Obama-appointed Hawaiian judge, Judge Derek Watson. Because a reasonable, objective observer, enlightened by the specific historical context, contemporaneous public statements, and specific sequence of events leading to its issuance, would conclude that the executive order was issued with a purpose to disfavor a particular religion in spite of its stated religiously neutral purpose. End of statement. One of the longest run-on sentences you will encounter even in law, Matt Slapp, but a reasonable and objective observer in the mind of this judge, God bless him, holds greater weight than the law and the Constitution and the facts before him. Extraordinary writing, I think, in supporting this order against the president's extreme vetting order.
But not surprising. So this is what these left-wing judges do, is they don't necessarily just look at the Constitution and the clear interpretation of the words therein, and then look at this executive order, which had expert legal research done to create it. He doesn't look at those words. What he's saying is he looked at Trump's remarks at some rallies and equated them with the Constitution and what's in this executive order. That is absurd, and it's one of the reasons why the American people are crying out for some sanity from their government.
Yeah, Hawaii at this point, you know, after you read this, it looks as though it's created a judiciary from an altered state, not another state in the Union. This judge is quite a piece of business.
Well, we have over 100, too many, I think it's over 370 federal judges in 94 districts, any one of whom can do what he can do, and unfortunately they're in that ninth court.
You mean decide who is and who is not a reasonable, objective observer? I love that.
And then unfortunately you go to the Ninth Court of Appeals, which is the most left-wing court in the country.
I think we ought to just shorten that to the most whacked-out left-wing judicial entity.
Matt and I both served in the White House and both tried to undo that by putting a few conservatives to balance on it, but we didn't succeed. My sense is this: I think they did the best job they could in fixing it from the original challenge. I think it'll win out, but the problem is you've got another period of time here that goes by, and it just clouds up the concept, and ultimately the vetting and the legislation is what's going to be critical, and that needs to get moving too.
Yeah, and so we're back where we were, or where we've been since the first day on February 3rd against the original order of President Trump. It was this revised order was to go into effect tomorrow. It has now been stayed by a clearly impartial and highly objective and utterly reasonable fellow, Derek Watson, out in Hawaii, who thinks he can decide just exactly who has their heads on straight and who doesn't. I mean, let's turn to another issue, and that is, speaking of heads on straight, the House leadership, the way in which Ryan Care has been rolled out. Matt, we now have the Budget Committee tomorrow. They're within just the thinnest of votes, about 4 votes, in which Ryan Care could go down if the Freedom Caucus and others do not support the legislation.
You know, Lou, we watched John Boehner try to operate as speaker, and we learned, I thought, something, which is just taking a piece of legislation that's cooked up in the speaker's office and jamming it through will not work. And what it does is it creates more animosity amongst Republicans. And this was rolled out in a way where most people didn't even have a heads up as to what it even contained, including members of Congress, but certainly other conservative journalists, et cetera. And it's a big problem. And you will not pass a Obamacare replacement without conservatives feeling like they have a fair shot at their amendments. And that's what Jim DeMint talked about earlier on your show, and that is what they have to do in order to heal this Republican rift.
And then heal it, fix the bill, come to terms with whatever reality is. It seems like the leadership in the House, and I've got to say, I understand there are lots of extenuating circumstances like arcane parliamentary procedures and paths down which all of this legislation must pass. But for crying out loud, they have had all these years, and really make it very clear they know very little about what is necessary. They had plenty of time to adjust to President Trump's demands that it create lower premiums, that it cover more people, that it create better health care in this country. Where do we head from here, in all likelihood, in your judgment, Ed?
If you don't open this process up to where members of Congress, Republicans or Democrats, have the opportunity to amend it and to correct it, you're going to end up with a bad bill again, and you may fail and fail miserably. We're going to know that very quickly. We're doing what we condemned the Democrats for doing 7 years ago, and my sense is we need to fix this thing. There's a lot of smart people in Congress that ought to basically working on this bill, and at the end of the day, they ought to find something that get 218 votes in the House and more votes in the Senate, 51 plus, and that they need to let this thing be worked.
Let it be worked. These are people choosing not to work, and that's really one of the issues I want to address here. I want both of you to address it. This president is working 24/7, 7 days a week, week in and week out. He set a new standard in work ethics. Meanwhile, the House and the Senate, you would think you were watching a country club at which someone has a booking for every 3 days. They show up, pitch somebody the keys to the car, and then show up again 2 days later. This isn't a job for them. This is just it's a venue. And something of what would you call it, a sinecure from the taxpayers. These people are not working hard, at least most of them. And certainly the leadership isn't trying to move with efficiency, productivity. There's no metric here for success other than whether they're reelected again, whether it's 2 years or 6 years. What are they? When will the Capitol Hill wake up?
That's, Lou, that's the most important part of this, besides getting the policy right, which is the other side of this, and Ed knows this well as well, which is if they don't pass an acceptable Obamacare replacement, it's going to be off with their heads. This is the thing that Republicans across this country have been crying about doing for 7 years. It is a shame to squander this opportunity that Dr. Burgess talked about all over the squabble. You heard Dave Pratt on your show.
It's worse than that, I think, Matt, if I may say. It's betrayal of a president elected to change the status quo and to root out the establishment, the orthodoxy, and the ossified way of doing things in the nation's capital. You get the last word.
They should have repealed it on day one. They repealed it in the past, and then take the year or whatever to find a replacement. But until they repeal it, there's no great pressure on it.
We'll have more with Ed and Matt coming up here in moments. Stay with us throughout. We're going to be talking to you about a Russian spy ship returning off the east coast of the United States, and we will have that for you on the other side of these commercials. Stay with us. We're coming right back. A Russian spy ship returning off the east coast of the United States, the Viktor Leonov, today spotted 20 miles southeast of the U.S. Navy's submarine base in Kings Bay, Georgia, headed north. The spy ship remaining in international waters, U.S. territorial waters, of course, extend to 12 miles offshore. The Leonov made a similar journey in February, sailing close to naval bases in Virginia and Connecticut. And FBI Director James Comey and NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers to testify before the House Intelligence Committee on March 20th. The chairman of that committee, Devin Nunes, today outlined the investigation ahead over President Trump's claim his campaign headquarters have been wiretapped by President Obama.
Are you going to take the tweets literally? And if you are, then clearly the president was wrong. But if you're not going to take the tweets literally, and if there's a concern that the president has about other people, other surveillance activities looking at him or his associates, either appropriately or inappropriately. We want to find that out.
And back with us, Matt Slapp and Ed Rollins. Ed, let me start with you. Well, this story gets more bizarre with every passing day. The House Intelligence Committee making some sort of demand that you either prove something or not within 24 hours. I mean, it's preposterous.
Well, obviously, if I was advising the president, which I'm not, I would suggest that he talk to the two gentlemen that talking about bringing forward his committee, because they both work for him, and find out if there is anything, and if there's anything there, let them go forward. If there's not anything, basically suggest to the committee there's nothing there. I mean, what the committee is trying to do at this point in time is not find evidence, trying to make the president look foolish, and I just don't think that's fair to him.
Do you agree, Matt?
I think that if the Obama administration was not surveilling Trump world and the Trump campaign, then why did the New York Times and the Washington Post and all these supposedly eminent media outlets write stories after story after story about how Trump was so wired up with Putin and Russia that there were several investigations going on? I mean, which is it? Were there investigations, and what was the Obama administration looking at these connections with Putin or not? They can't have it both ways, and I think the president is making a very fair point. Let's put on the table what happened. Let's not compromise our national security. Let's go through the intelligence committees, but I want to know what happened.
I'm astounded by this, and very simply to the point you're making, Matt. We have had this, 6 months of innuendo assertion that there is a relationship of some kind between Russia and the Trump campaign. Not one scintilla of evidence has been produced by a single agency, by a single preposterous news organization from the left trying to dangle this fruit in front of its users, readers, what have you. And yet we have a situation now, concomitantly, with Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff of the House Intelligence Committee attaching a date certain which to prove that President Obama was surveilling, wiretapping, whatever expression you want to use, President Trump. I mean, Ed, this is an absurdity.
Well, it's just a continuation of the circus, and I think Matt makes a very good point. My concern is, anytime you go before a congressional hearing, even if there's no evidence whatsoever, someone on the other side basically leaks, well, there really was some evidence, we just didn't present it or what have you. We have to stop the store if there's nothing valid there. And I think at the end of the day, there's not going to be anything valid there.
Nothing valid there, but there is, of course, the continuation of leaks, Matt, from the government now led by President Trump. And it doesn't appear to be improving. It actually seems to be worsening.
Yeah, and I want to go back to this idea, which is the press has been covering the fact that there's this investigation going on in Trump world, and they've been talking about the fact that people have been surveilled. I want all these media outlets to apologize to us if they've all been getting the story wrong for all these weeks. And I do think the leaks are a big problem, and I think these leaks are criminal, and I think they're just trying to create a cloud over President Trump's head and the administration, and I think the American people can see this for what it is, and we have to stay on this.
Ed, Matt, thank you both. We appreciate it. And by the way, that correction that you're looking for, Matt, look about page 33. It'll be in the lower left in agate type.
Cold day in Hades, Matt. You and I both worked in White Houses. We know how it looks.
Up next, President Trump about to take the stage.